The following program is a Town of Colony television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling.
Top of the day, I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Detting.
And this is Story by Story.
Celebrating the human spirit.
And we're storytellers, Kate and I. And we're going to have about an hour conversation with you and a wonderful guest storyteller about the art of storytelling, about how to use storytelling as a method of teaching and entertainment. Anything else we're going to try to do?
Not tap dance today.
Not tap dance. And I'm not playing the kazoo. I decided that was going to be off the table.
Right. Okay.
But I've had a wonderful month of traveling around and doing stuff. How about you?
Well, I've had not too much traveling, but first Elizabeth Ellis graced my home once again for a weekend workshop.
And tell our listeners
Elizabeth Ellis is one of the finest storytellers in the country. She's been recognized by the National Storytelling Network by 2 awards, the Circle of Excellence Award and the Lifetime Achievement Award. Mm-hmm. And there are only 24 or so people who have received that last award. So, and she's also a wonderful harvester of story or midwife.
Midwife of stories. That's a good line.
So she did that, and she did a house concert at my home.
Oh, wonderful.
So 2 things I want to share about her. One, in the workshop, she said that she wanted to share something that she learned from the singer-songwriter Tom Paxton years ago. She took a workshop with him, and he said, every day I wake up and say, I'm a singer-songwriter. What am I going to do as a singer-songwriter today? He said, some days I am at home and I can work on new songs. Other days I'm traveling, so creating a new song is hard. But I could perfect lyrics pretty much anywhere I am and so I have taken that to heart and go every day. I'm a storyteller, and what am I going to do about, to that end today?
That's a great thought, and
no matter what you do.
Boy, oh boy! I've heard you. I just want you to know that I'm going to start to do that because sometimes when you introduce yourself and they ask you what do you do, and you say you're a storyteller, they go right, and I.
So you tell a lot of lies, huh?
Yeah, right. Well. I can't top that. Although I did have a bucket list item happen for the 3rd time. For the 3rd time.
You're only supposed to dip into the bucket once.
Well,
I think.
if you get a bucket list going around more than once, that's like just a big bucket. And you know how I went through a phase where I was giving away red noses and kazoos?
In fact, I vacuumed up one from underneath the bed. It all of a sudden the vacuum cleaner wasn't working so well, and I pulled out a dusty red nose.
Well, I was just all over with these red noses. And so my wife acted on it with a surprise birthday party, and I got to lead a parade with a red nose and all my friends and noses and kazoos. And then we did a fundraiser for the Art Center in Schenectady, and that was part of a jazz band. And Sandy Schuman gave them a saxophone, as I recall, in the appeal to that, which is another story. And then I had a great niece get married in Seattle. And about a month before that, my sister-in-law emailed me asking where I bought my red noses. So I sent it back to her. Why'd I ask? She says, I'm getting ready for you. And we got to Seattle, and she had 125 red noses and kazoos. And her son, my nephew, the bride's father, had very quietly nosed the Doolittle side of the church just after their vows were pronounced. And I thought it was one of the nicest things anybody could ever do for me in the family. And so at the end of all the celebrations of the cake cutting and all the other stuff at the wedding reception, they introduced me, and I came up, and my brother and his wife were on each side of me, one with a bag of noses, one with a bag of kazoos. I told the story. We gave out the kazoos. We did a whole conga line till I heard it from the grapevine, and the party went on an extra hour. So, that's a bucket list item, like cubed. We're sharing memories here, and I just want you to know that one of the things about storytelling is that in a way, when you think about a story, if you're going to tell a story or write a story, you're really writing about a moment, a memory. We don't tell stories about days per se. There's always a crucible of a moment in there, and that's a little bit of shared learning about the nature of things and stories. We have a wonderful guest here today, and maybe we ought to introduce him and bring him into the conversation. What do you think?
I think it's time.
I think it's time. Sandy Schuman is with us. And Sandy Schuman is one of the greatest friends of storytelling in upstate New York. He's practices art kind of semi-professionally as a facilitator and a consultant with the Rockefeller Institute, and he's done remarkably well in those interpersonal things. And he is a harvester of stories about interesting things and situations, many of which have to do with music. Sandy, we're so pleased to have you here.
I'm pleased to be here. What a word, pleased.
Pleased to be here.
And one thing he did as a facilitator and as a storyteller, he had the idea that we could, the Story Circle Guild could produce a book of an anthology of our stories, and he took it from its this idea, and he carried it through with what I thought was an over elaborate process, but turned out to be just what was needed.
You mean when
feedback? I think four times you got feedback on your story, and I had one story that I thought was pretty good, but was even better by the time Marnie suggested that part, and So it was a wonderful, and it happened, and it's available. And so I wanted to publicly say thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy, for that. And at first we did think you were going a little bit overboard when you brought in the professional editor, but that turned out to be one of the key elements of the whole book.
It's a quality book that I'm pleased to give out to friends and sell to others.
I even kind of give them away at the right time when somebody asks about storytelling. So there you go.
But,
Sandy, were you always a storyteller?
Well, I could tell you a story.
And that's why I'm laughing, because I've heard that story.
When I was a child, bedtime, my father would tell me stories, and they were not stories that he read out of some book. They were stories that just came out of his head, and they were mostly stories about him, his life. And it amazes me today that there were certain stories that I wanted to hear him tell over and over again about when he was a little boy. Anyway, that would come to an end, and it would be time for me to go to sleep, and so he would kiss me goodnight, and I'd have this image in my head of a grandfatherly figure with a big book open and a little boy sitting on his lap. And they were coming to the end of the page, and this story that they were reading was the story of me. It was the story of my day. And as my day was coming to a close, the little boy would climb off of the grandfatherly lap and close the big book, and I would go to sleep. And in the morning, I had this idea that in the morning, I would have this image of the little boy climbing up onto the grandfatherly lap, and they would open the big book and begin the story of me. I've never managed to do that, to wake up in the morning and conjure up that image. I'm still working on it. But I've taken to opening my storytelling shows, my performances, with that story.
With opening the book.
Open, this image, and then at the end, I say, when I go to bed tonight, I'll have that image in my head of the story of me, the grandfatherly lap and the book and the little boy, And I'll see in the story of me, all of you are in that book, and perhaps when you go to sleep, you'll have that image too, and you'll see me in your story, and we'll be forever connected by our stories.
That's a beautiful method, although some of the players have changed a little, haven't they? I mean, haven't you moved from the boy in the lap to the grandfather in the story? I'm sorry, I had to do that.
Right. I'm sticking with the little boy.
You're sticking with the little boy, okay.
He's in touch with his inner child.
Okay.
As are you.
Well, when did you begin to think about storytelling as something more than a bedtime experience?
Oh boy, you've heard this story too, but far be it for me to not tell it again. I was conducting a training program with a colleague in, of all places, the Pentagon. It was a 3-day training program. And at the end of the training program, they had to fill out these evaluation forms. So I'm sitting there next to my co-trainer, and he's got this pile of evaluation forms. And on the back of the form, it says, what was the best part of the workshop? And people write in an answer. And so he looks at these evaluation forms, hands them over to me, and I look at them and I see, what was the best part of the workshop? And somebody wrote in, Sandy's stories. And I didn't know what they were talking about. I look at a couple more, see another one, another. What did you like best about Sandy told some really great stories. I'm getting puzzled. Another one comes by. The stories that Sandy told were right on target. And I looked over at my co-trainer and I said, Freeman, what are they talking about? And he looks at me puzzled and says, Sandy, don't you remember you told that story about the time they threw you out of the meeting? That you had that one about how the guy came in late and he was wearing a t-shirt and shorts and a hangover? And you had all these stories you told, and I realized, yes, I did tell a lot of stories. It just came naturally. I wasn't aware of it. And then I became a storyteller.
There you go.
But your father had always been telling you the stories of his life, and that's how you communicate in the Schuman family.
That's exactly it. But not at the level of awareness of saying, oh, I tell stories. It was just...
I have to derail us for just a moment. Can you tell us what training course you were giving at the Pentagon?
It was in group facilitation.
Oh.
Collaborative problem solving and decision making.
Okay.
Wow.
You notice how that just rolls off
Yes.
my tongue? Collaborative problem solving and decision making. Yeah, took a lot of practice.
You're also a musician, and I must say that when I first met you as a storyteller, and then at one of your performances, you had the guitar with you, and you played so beautifully. I mean, those two things kind of came along together, or how did the music kind of start?
When I was a kid, I liked to listen to talk radio, what there was of it at the time. I was not big I did not listen to popular music or classical music. But the music that I did listen to was folk music. And what attracted me to folk music, as opposed to these other forms, was that folk singers, before they sing the song, they tell a story. It's typically a story that introduces the song. It puts the song in context. And I really like that. Again, not really thinking analytically about it. I just like that. But that's in large measure what attracted me to folk music. Mm-hmm. And why it is that orchestras and symphonies and why they don't tell the story is a great mystery to me. Although some of them do.
The Colony Town Memorial Band does that. And one of our faithful listeners, Bob Suss, is the one who comes up with the commentary before each piece. And yes, it makes a huge difference. And I also saw, I think it was Itzhak Perelman in a performance. And 2/3 of the way, he says nothing. And then the last third, he introduces each piece, and it was like he was recognizing that we were there. It made such a huge difference. You're right. They should all do it. And from our lips to your ears, and please make it happen.
Well, I'm going to email David Allen Miller. I just want you to know, because he does a little bit of
Yes,
that
he does.
with the Albany Symphony, and it makes a big difference in understanding both the music and the musicians, particularly if you pick out kind of the lead parts and certain things, and he introduces those people. You're right. They should be doing more of that.
Yeah, well, and I think in the Schenectady Symphony, they have a pre-show where they kind of do all that. And then you have to sort of remember it. But anyways, we have been talking. Oh, you have a new program, or a new title that encompasses a number of stories, many more than you can tell in 1 hour. New York Tales, Tall and True. Each one is probably one or the other, or sometimes there's a mixture, maybe?
Sometimes, I would say often.
Often. Isn't that a lovely
Yeah,
word?
the subtitle there is some of New York's. Is it there? I can't remember. You know, you'd think I would. Oh yeah, it's there. It is. Read
Some
that.
of New York State's folklore is truly unbelievable. Some of its history is even more so.
Oh.
There you go.
There you go.
Do you have one of those stories here? Or do
Funny you should ask.
Oh,
Yeah, as
We
a matter of
planned
fact,
this.
I do.
what a segue. What a
Yeah.
segue.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I would tell you a story that I like to call The Curse of Mamie O'Rourke. And we'll start off with a song,
Good.
with or without kazoo. That's where Johnny Casey, little Jimmy Crow, Jakey Krause the baker, who always had the dough, boys and girls together, we would sing and waltz while Tony played the organ on the sidewalks of New York. East side, west side, all around the town. The tots sing Ring a Rosie, London Bridge is falling down. Boys and girls together, me and Mamie O'Rourke, tripped the light fantastic on the sidewalks of New York. Well, that song, written in 1894, came about when Charles Lawler, who was a small-time vaudeville performer, a singer, he's coming home from a performance, walking, and he's thinking, you know, I'm singing other people's songs. They get the credit. They have to get paid. You know, I should write my own songs. He'd never written a song before, but as he continues to walk, this tune comes into his head, and he continues to walk and work on this tune. And then he goes to his friend's place of work. His friend James Blake works at a haberdashery, and he hums this song for him. And Blake likes it, and he gets Lawler to repeat it over and over again. And finally, he says, I got it. You go write the music down, and I'll work on the lyrics. And Blake puts these lyrics together. Lawler comes back. He's got the music written down. 1894, it's a big hit. People are singing this all over. Time goes on. It's no longer very popular, but then Al Smith runs for President of the United States. Al Smith, governor, four-term governor of the state of New York. a reformer working on efficiency in government, consolidated New York government from hundreds of separate agencies and commissioners to a manageable number, increased the centrality, the power of the governor, not just in New York, but this led to reforms in other states as well. That was his theme song. One could say that it lost him the election in 1928. He carried 8 states. Herbert Hoover got the remaining 40. He used it as his theme song again in 1932 when he sought the Democratic nomination again, which he lost to FDR. FDR had a better theme song. Happy Days Are Here Again. Yeah. Jack Yellen and Milton Adger. Anyway, the song has become more and less prominent over the years, but for decades it was the theme song at Belmont Raceway. And the Belmont Stakes, the third race of the Triple Crown, drew the biggest crowd, and that was the song that they heard, all these horse racing fans. Well, attendance at the racetrack began to fall off. And so the management, among other measures, decided, we should update the song. This is an old song. This is 1894. It doesn't speak to our current clientele. This is, the 80s and 90s, long time after the song was popular. And so they changed the song to New York, New York. Thank you for that little musical rendition. Well, that seemed like a good idea, except that since 1978, when Affirmed won the Triple Crown, this is the Kentucky Derby, followed a couple of weeks later by the Preakness, followed by a couple of weeks later the Belmont Stakes, and to win the Triple Crown, the horse has to be first in each of those 3 races. Well, there were a lot of horses that came in first in the Derby and then came in first in the Preakness and did not come in first at Belmont. And horse race fans were justifiably upset. Prior to that, every few years, there would be a Triple Crown winner. 37 years go by. It's not until 2015 that American Pharoah wins the Triple Crown. Now, if you were to Google the curse of Mamie O'Rourke, you would find that the fans concluded that the reason why no horse was winning the Triple Crown was because Mamie O'Rourke wouldn't let them. Because Belmont stopped playing the song. And the only way to get the Triple Crown back was to reinstate the song. Well, the managers of Belmont Raceway did that. They put the song back, not as the main theme song, but they kind of snuck it in, hidden. Didn't work. Until 2015, American Pharoah won the Triple Crown. But the horse racing pundits have not been able to solve the mystery. Why was the curse lifted? There's nothing that makes any sense. So I did some research. I hesitate to admit how much time I spent looking at this. I'm looking at the trainers, the owners, the jockeys, all sorts of, what could possibly explain how the curse was lifted. I'm not finding any pattern. And then I had an idea. In that song, we have, of course, Mamie O'Rourke, there's Johnny Casey, Little Jimmy Crow, Pretty Nellie Shannon. These are all Irish names. And so I'm trying to find an Irish connection. And I noticed in my searches this newspaper article, New York Times, prior to the Belmont, after American Pharoah had won the Derby and the Preakness. But prior to the Belmont, his owner sold the breeding rights to Coolmore Farms, a stud farm headquartered in Ireland. So the progeny of American Pharoah would be Irish in that sense. Well, if that was true, well, what about all the other horses, the other 11 horses, the near misses, that didn't win the Triple Crown? Well, I looked at their retirement homes, and they're all out there in stud farms somewhere in the United States, American-owned farms, Japan, Chile. None of them are on Irish farms except for American Pharoah. So that's my explanation, that Mamie O'Rourke lifted the curse because American Pharoah would be breeding for the Irish. And so with that puzzle solved, we can now sing the entire song, or at least the verses I didn't get already. Down in front of Casey's old brown wooden stoop, on a summer's evening we formed a merry troop. Boys and girls together, we would sing and waltz while Tony played the organ on the sidewalks of New York. And that's where Johnny Casey, little Jimmy Crow, Jakey Krause, the baker's son who always had the dough, pretty Nellie Shannon with a dude as light as a cork, she first picked up the wall step on the sidewalks of New York. Things have changed since those times. Some are up in G, others they are on the hog, but they all feel just like me. They'd give up all they've got if they could once more walk with their best girl and have a twirl on the sidewalks of New York. East side, west side, all around the town, the tots sing ring-a-rosy, London Bridge is falling down. Boys and girls together, we would sing and waltz while Tony played the organ on the sidewalks of New York.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'll give you a real clap.
So you solved the mystery.
I believe so. I think I found the reason why Mamie O'Rourke lifted the curse, thankfully. Thank you, Mamie.
So I do not keep up with the horses. What happened in 2016, 17, and 18? Any Triple Crown winner?
Well, we just had another one, I think.
Yeah.
Justify.
Justify, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
okay.
So the curse would appear to be lifted. The horse racing pundits are still struggling, but
Have you contacted Belmont?
can't say as I have.
Well, you know that the New York Racing Association, which runs these racetracks, should be informed about the error that they committed, and perhaps we could start a little appeal to bring back the song.
Oh, there were many.
Oh.
The fans were vociferous, and that's why they reintroduced the Sidewalks of New York, but played by the bugler or something, not the main song. And so the curse theory took further root.
I would think that we could get them to bring it back just for the draw value of the story of the curse.
One would hope.
One would hope.
Right.
I think you should tell the story there.
Right.
Okay.
Like Belmont.
You set that up for me.
All right. All right. We'll put that in the production company.
Tell your manager.
Tell your manager. Yeah.
Right, I'll tell my manager to do it. Good idea. Yeah. There's another somewhat interesting footnote to the song, 1894. So it has this line, some are up in G. Things have changed since those times. Some are up in G. Well, what does that mean? Well, the Linguist Societies of America and various blogs and websites have researched this extensively, trying to find other instances from that era or earlier where that phrase is used, and many theories about what that means. In a nutshell, it means something good. You know, up in G. One theory is that it's a musical illusion. G is the letter of the highest note in the scale, A, B, C, D, F, G, and then you start with A again. It could stand for Gramercy Park, you know, private park in Manhattan where you have to be a little well-heeled in order to live there. So mostly allusions to things being well off. A couple of theories otherwise. One is that it's a reference to the subway, the G line, but the G line wasn't built in 1894, so that theory goes away. Another is that it's a reference to jail, J-A-O-L, you know, some old English spelling of jail, which would be a reference to Sing Sing, you know, being up in jail. That one doesn't get a lot of merit. And the other phrase is, others, they are on the hog. Others, they are on the hog, but they all feel just like me. And hog is a reference to the engine of a train. And, you know, the head hog is the head engineer. Okay. So it's apparently, from what I can tell from the Slang Dictionary of America, still, the engine may still be referred to as a hog, but on the hog means you're riding the rails, you're a tramp, you're not doing so well.
Oh, wow.
You're a bum. So some are up in G, others they are on the hog, but they all feel just like me. Good nostalgia song, eh?
Hey, it's a nice solid bit of research, Sandy. I think that's really good. It was a pleasure to listen to it. Oh, yeah. We'll be back with Sandy, and right now Kate's going to kind of tell us what's going on in storytelling in the month of November, the month of Thanksgiving.
Yes, and it starts on the first Tuesday of the month at Tuesday Tales and Stuff at Arthur's Market and Historic Coffee House in the Stockade section of Schenectady. On November 6th, Stories of Gratitude. And it's an open mic for storytelling, music, and spoken word. So come on down, enjoy the food, the atmosphere, and good times shared by all. Then we have on that Friday, which is now the second Friday of the month, Shawnee evenings happen at the Irish American Heritage Museum on Broadway in Albany, across from the Old Delaware Hudson.
Well, it's now SUNY Plaza.
SUNY Plaza. Stories of Remembrance and Thanksgiving with Marnie Gillard and Nancy Marie Payne, who have been on this show. And they are both tremendous storytellers. Actually, we only have tremendous storytellers on this
We only
show.
have tremendous.
We don't invite the mediocre ones.
And we have tremendous hosts, too, don't you think? Yes.
Okay, moving right along. Then the Interfaith Story Circle, which is another wonderful group in the area, is having their monthly meeting on Thursday, November 13th at 7 o'clock, Wisdom Tales for Life's Journey with tellers from Story Circle, Frankly Speaking, that's Frank Wind and Dee Lee Wind, at Channing Hall, First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany on Washington Avenue. Didn't think I could get through all of that.
And that's a great place to listen to a story.
Right, and so you can come and listen, and I should spell wisdom with an M, not an N.
Proofreading on the set.
Yes, yes. The slides get added afterwards. So we highly recommend that. But a highlight of the year, we like to think,
Yes.
is Telebration. It'll be our 23rd annual Telebration at the GE Theater in Proctor's in Schenectady on Sunday, November 18th at 3:30 p.m. And our topic is Sparks.
Sparks.
So
Sparks will fly?
Sparks will fly, and our storytellers will be Joe Doolittle, Kate Dudding, Eileen Egan-Mack, Elliot Nieves, Claire Nolan, Barbara Palumbo, Nancy Marie Payne, Karen Pillsworth, and Sandy Schuman.
So that's going to be a great lineup, and it's in the afternoon on Sunday.
November 18th at 3:30 p.m. The refreshments at intermission are fabulous.
Right.
Worth coming just for the refreshment.
Yes.
Just-
But the stories even more so. And Sparks, that title has sparked different responses from different people. There will be some personal stories, some new literary stories, so fictional stories that our tellers have come up with. Norse myth. And they're usually grim, even though the Grimm brothers had nothing to do with them. All kinds of wonderful stuff. That's a horrible word for a storyteller to say.
But it's a good
Fabulous tales.
stuff fits right in November. You put it in the turkey. So it's
Oh, stuffing. That's what I was. No, I wasn't.
No.
Thanks for the save.
Almost save.
Almost save.
Yeah.
And then we have our monthly meeting of the Story Circle of the Capital District on Tuesday, November 20th, right here at Colony Town Library, 6 to 8 p.m. Follow the signs to figure out how you enter the building and where we're going to be. It's under reconstruction. It'll be a great building once it's done, but in the meantime, we're being flexible.
our beloved library is being updated.
Yes, and we love being here. And then to finalize the month is the storytelling open mic at Cafe Lena, now every fourth Tuesday of the month, except for December because that's Christmas. And the featured teller on November 27th will be our very own Siri Allison.
Serials.
And that is an open mic for storytelling only, and they're very strict. No notes. You might get by with a few things written on your hands if you're, but other than that, but they're very attentive too. So I think, that's that. I didn't recommend that. No. But they very much encourage you a first telling of a story that's isn't polished. That this is, sometimes you need a live audience, and that you can do at our guild meetings also. But at the guild meetings, you can get as much or as little feedback as you want.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, Sandy has
Feedback
approved any
is,
number of my stories, as has Joe. They're keen listeners, and they go, well, that little spot there, it was a little vague, fuzzy, confusing, whatever.
And Cafe Lena is about 2 years from its renovation, which
Yes.
was spectacular. So if you haven't been up to the new Cafe Lena, you should visit sometime on one of our open mics. It's a great experience.
It's the old lady's gotten a facelift. You can still recognize her, but the acoustics have been vastly improved. The food has gone up, and that's all available when you come to the open mic for a modest fee. Then just a slide to remind you of our 12th season at Proctor's. It includes word plays, which is very much like Telebration, except they're held on the lower level of Proctor's, underneath the box office. So sometimes it's known as the Underground, sometimes it's called the Hearst Education Center. Might even have a third name. But it's just, you go down the stairs in the box office, and there will be. So we have, after Telebration that we've just mentioned, we'll have 3 more word plays in the Underground in January through April 7th. I'm looking forward, all of them, starting over Inside Out. I don't know what people are going to come up with for Inside Out. But Siri, Joe, and Siri produces a weird place up in Salem. Somebody came up with a bunch, and then others said, well, these are my favorite, and so we all sort of chimed in on it. Inside Out and Shenanigans. That's after both St. Patrick's Day on March 17th and April Fool's Day on April 1st. So Shenanigans is on April 7th.
I'm looking forward to that. I really am.
So, and if you can't make it out to any of our events, or if you're dying to hear a story someday, we're available on demand on YouTube, and not to come to your home. No. Though that could be arranged for a fee. StoryCircle@proctors.org, and click on YouTube for over 200 stories, many recorded right here in this studio. So that's the end of the coming attractions.
Wow, that's a pretty full month.
Yes, indeed.
That's great.
Something to be thankful for.
I think we ought to go back and see if Sandy has another story.
I bet he does.
Do you have another story?
Funny you should ask. Again, twice in 1 hour. The legacy, the McPherson legacy to the city of Albany. There is not much that I can tell you about John and Mary McPherson. They came to this country with their parents when they were children in the early part of the 1800s. Their father got a job as a janitor working for the state of New York, a job that his son John took over. And neither John nor Mary ever married. They spent the rest of their lives in Albany. When their parents died, they inherited whatever they had saved. And when John died, Mary inherited everything he had saved. And as her years were getting on, she was approached by members of the St. Andrew's Society, the Scottish Support Association. Apparently there had been a long-standing desire on the part of the Scots community, the Caledonian Club, the St. Andrew's Society, to honor the ploughman bard, the poet of Scotland, Robert Burns, with a statue, a monument. Resolutions had been passed adopting this idea, but the money was very slow in accumulating. They approached Mary McPherson to see if she would be willing to direct the remains of her estate to that purpose. It turned out that the savings of the family that had accumulated amounted to $30,000 or $40,000. This is, 1880 money. $40,000 today would be roughly equivalent to $1 million. They were successful in gaining Mary's agreement, and in her will she specified that such a statue honoring Robert Burns be created. Peter Kinnear, who was owned a foundry, a businessman, actually invested in and then became the manufacturer of the first plastic. The plastic was invented by John Wesley Hyatt, and they made billiard balls, where billiard balls had been made of ivory from elephants, causing the destruction of the elephant population, and also causing an imperfectly balanced sphere. So their plastic celluloid billiard ball was a superior product and half the price. So they were doing pretty well financially. But he was able to convince Mary McPherson of this effort, and he became the executor and thereby had the job of actually seeing through the creation of this monument. And interviewing various sculptors. They finally decided on a sculptor who originally came from Albany by coincidence, and everyone approved this was the finest monument ever to Robert Burns. And mind you, there are many, many monuments to Robert Burns. And so you can see it in Albany, in Washington Park. I would recommend that you go there. You'll see the statue, Robert Burns sitting with a book in hand. And along the footing of the statue, you'll see various quotes from his poems and songs. And on the pedestal, the granite pedestal, on each side is a scene from one of his songs or poems, including one from Auld Lang Syne, picturing a couple of guys sitting at a table with mugs in their hands. But I'd like to ask you further, as you remember Robert Burns, to look at the backside of the monument, the backside of the stone pedestal. A few inches above the ground, engraved in the stone, you will see the words, McPherson Legacy to the City of Albany, 1888. And so you might remember Robert Burns and his literary contributions, and you might also remember the McPherson family, John and Mary and their parents. And so in their honor, as well as in honor of Robert Burns, we should sing his best known work. It gets sung a lot, I think at least once a year on New Year's Eve. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. We too have run about the hills and picked the daisies fine, but we've wandered many a weary foot since Auld Lang Syne. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. We too have paddled in the stream, and from morning sun till dine, but seas between us broad have roared since Auld Lang Syne. Here's a hand, my trusty friend, and give us a hand of thine. We'll drink a cup of goodwill and Auld Lang Syne. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne.
Auld Lang Syne.
For long, Auld Lang Syne, old long since.
Old long.
Thank
In
you.
a literal sense, but idiomatically it would be, for days gone by or for old time's sake.
Oh.
So how did you trip across?
Well,
McPherson's?
okay, so I was in the Albany Public Library decades ago, and I can't really put this politely. I had to use the men's room, and I thought I would take something in the men's room to read, and so on my way to the men's room, I just picked something off the shelf, And that something turned out to be the historical sketch of the Burns statue from 1888. And so I'm reading about this statue and how it was created, and it's as fortuitous as that, or serendipitous as that, really.
Sometimes you find the story, and sometimes the story finds you. There you go. I mean, I thought he was going to say he was with one of his kids playing in the park and noticed the affirmation at the statue.
That would be a
base.
better story, but
That would
it
be a
wouldn't be
tall
true.
one, though.
Right. And indeed, you know, I've looked at this inscription at the base of the pedestal. Unless you're looking for it, you won't notice it. It is the same color as the stone. It's engraved, but it's low down. I mean, it's not at eye height.
well
It's right. It's not lit. I mean, it's in shadow. You don't see a difference in the light between the stone and the engraved letters. I've tried to photograph it.
Yeah.
You look at the photograph, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
It's really nondescript, obscure,
Maybe on a cloudy day.
with a bright light shown at an angle. I've thought about how can you photograph this so it would actually show up.
If people are interested in learning more about Sandy Schuman as a storyteller, do you have a web page or anything like that?
Okay, for the third time, I'm going to say, funny you should ask. www.tothestory.com.
Oh,
tothestory.com.
Wonderful.
Yeah, which is from a quote that my father used to say, there is always another side to the story.
It's also another side.
Right, so another side to the story.com was already taken. So
you just
to the
another
story,
side to the story.
right.
Wow.
Okay.
Now, we've got just a minute.
We have about 7 minutes.
Oh, 7 minutes. Well, this could be good. One of the more delightful things that you've done, in my opinion, is Adirondack Mendel's
Roof.
And, you know, that's
That's the title of the book.
That's the title of the book, and it's masterful. I was traveling in the West, and I have a friend who was, I have a friend, and I was looking for something to bring to Bob, and he has an interesting Jewish background. So I brought him, Alex. I brought him your book, and I got this wonderful email about how much he was enjoying it. So it's infectious, and that must have bubbled up from someplace that wasn't a men's room.
Oh, who knows?
Well, the other title for the book is Welcome to Helms Pond.
Welcome to Helms Pond.
Which is difficult enough to say, but it's easier than Adirondack Mendel's Ufruf. So you get full credit for mastering Adirondack Mendel's Ufruf. The Helm story actually originates from a German collection of stories, and they're stories about people who are fools. They do ridiculous things. They go to great extent to correct a simple error, and I used to like those stories as a kid. The Helm stories really just put it in a Jewish context, and these are old books. They're from the 1800s, might even be older than that. Anyhow, the Helm story as a type has been milked a lot, and yet they all seem to take place in the 1800s. You know, the villagers try to capture the moon in a wooden barrel. The villager goes to paradise on a horse-drawn cart. The teachers are locked in an iron chest, and so these are all images of a long time ago. And so I just wondered, what happened to these people? And then, given my New York bias, I figured it must be they moved to New York somewhere. And so I started searching around for Helm in New York. nothing. There is another.
That's CHELM.
Right, yeah. Since we don't have a ch sound in English, it's usually CH or KH. So I'm searching for both, find nothing. And then I thought, well, maybe it's an anglicized spelling, HELMS. And behold, there's a Helms Pond in the Adirondacks, named after David Helm, who was a forester, a conservation officer. And so I took that.
So they say.
So they say. Yeah, thanks for covering for me. And so that became the tract of land that the Helmites purchased
That you
and
searched
made the
long and
move.
hard for.
Right. And they searched long and hard for, and it's where every acre is 2 acres. You can till the soil with a teaspoon, and there are not only 4 seasons, there are 5. Summer, fall, winter, spring, black fly season. So that provided the geographic context for these stories, and most of the stories are old stories, jokes that I have imported into that Helm context, which is the storytelling process, the folklore process. You take an idea from here and an idea from there, and you smush them together, and before you know it, you've stolen a lot of ideas and retold them.
Do you have moose turd pie in that? I can't remember.
No.
Because that I've seen in various
Right.
lumbering camps.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
Well, I have taken Adirondack tall tale type stories and Helm stories and sort of mashed them together.
Maybe moose turd pie isn't kosher. No.
No, don't go there. Don't go there.
We've already been in the men's room.
Right.
That's true. That's
Right,
true.
yeah, right. I have thought that one of the items on the menu at the Broiled Beet, the
Broiled
local
Beet,
eatery, would be the gefilte fish and peanut butter sandwich. But my wife did not approve. I mean, there's some other pretty awful things on that menu, but
Gefilte fish and peanut butter.
right, the gefilte fish and peanut butter sandwich has not made it on the menu yet.
The Broiled Beet Diner. And what's the
Yes.
name of the waitress in the Broiled Beet Diner?
Bloomy.
Bloomy.
All the names in the book are people in my family. Bloomy is my sister, the crazy oboist who lives out in San Francisco, and so on. I didn't want to defame other people's names. I figured I'd keep it in the family.
So Bloomy is a nickname or?
It's my sister's Yiddish name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So typically, like my Yiddish name is Sender, Hebrew name, which is taken from Alexander the Great. I'm named after Alexander the Great. That's another story. Yeah.
Wow.
He was Jewish?
Okay. We have.
No, sorry. We have less than a minute now, so we have
Okay.
to start saying goodbye.
Well, Sandy, I am so touched and pleased that you've been with us today. It's been just wonderful. And Kate,
Okay.
you've had a great run with all the things that are going on, and we appreciate your being the organizer of all this, because without you, we would just be lost.
Sort of a ringmaster, three-ring
Ringmaster,
circus.
One to rule them all.
Well, anyways. And we want to thank you all for joining us, and we hope you'll join us at a live performance, or if not, back here on your cable network.
Or online at Story Circle at Proctor's YouTube.
Goodbye.
Au revoir.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again,